Could I ask officers on the Western Orbital, because I did say I wanted to ask about Highways England. If we look on our agenda pack, page 30, on B, it says ongoing liaison with Highways England in terms of their developing proposals for the M11 motorway, etc., etc., and that nothing's going to happen before 2020, but by 2017 they should have a good idea of what's going to happen. For me, this is hugely influential on what we may or may not decide to do with the Western Orbital. So, could I have a steer from officers of how robust these negotiations have been so far, and hopefully will be in the future? Because I do feel that Highways England do have their own agenda and timetable most of the time, and just because they put a date down doesn't mean they necessarily stick to it. So if we're in negotiations with them, trying to find out what's going on as far as they're concerned, so that we can integrate their thoughts with our plans, we don't want to be sitting here 2018, 19, etc., wondering what they're really going to do. So could I just have officers' thoughts on how robust these negotiations are and the timescale that we're going to stick to on our side? Who can answer that? Is that you, Bob? Thank you.
Myself again, Chairman. I think the key point is, and I haven't got the exact reference in the paper here, the key point is that they have their route improvement strategies, their RIS strategies, their 5-year plans, essentially as the rail industry do. The current 5-year plan to 2020 is already decided and fixed. They'll be consulting on that next year. They haven't been very specific with us as exactly when next year, but they've said they'll be consulting on it next year with the intention of putting it before DFT, for DFT to approve. I haven't got the reference in front of me now. I think we said 2019 would be the final approval of that plan. So there's an opportunity for us to influence that next year. They are very open to us putting forward suggestions for what's included in that plan. It's not necessarily a case of us negotiating with them, it's a case of us seeking to influence that plan, but ultimately decisions will be taken by DFT as to how much money they give Highways England and Highways England on what the priorities are. So as next year unfolds, that will become clear as to what that process is and what opportunities there are for either resolutions of the city deal to influence that new RIS process or involvement of local MPs to influence that RIS process. We'll be willing to keep you informed on how those discussions go.
Okay, thank you. But I think it's very sad as you say that it's not up to us and negotiations with them. I'd like to think that there's open discussion and negotiations with Highways England when they're doing something in an area that we're trying to do something. So it saddens me that you say it's going to be one-way traffic and we'll sit here and just wait and see what they decide they may or may not do. I don't know if you've got any further comments or whether you've just... Yes, you have, good.
If, for example, we think it's a really good idea to put an extra lane on the M11, let me just use that as an example, whether it's a lane for buses or a lane for general traffic, we'll want to put that forward next year as part of their consultation process. They'll need to look at the whole network, the whole of the trunk road and motorway network, and prioritise where they spend the fixed amount of money they'll get from central government, and decide those priorities. To the extent to which we will be able to influence that priority to spend the money in the Cambridgeshire section as opposed to elsewhere, clearly is limited. We can only press them, and press them as hard as we can, to prioritise that section as against other sections. But I've no doubt other authorities in other parts of the country will be pressing for improvements to their bits of the motorway network.
Okay, well my final question on this then is that when do we call it a day? Because if we want to try and integrate with Highways England as much as possible, when do we call it a day to say nothing's going to happen with Highways England and we've got to do what we want to do, as opposed to waiting and seeing what they want to do?
I think I'm right in saying, I haven't got the right reference in front of me here, I think I'm right in saying that the final decision on the RIS will be taken in 2019, essentially by central government, what the plan for the next 5 years for the motorway and trunk road network is. So that's the final curtain, as it were. The extent to when we can influence that the most is next year, when we'll be seeking to respond to the consultation, where we wanted to get our views formally recorded as to what we want, and envision us bringing a paper back to the Assembly and Board as to what we want to see. And we would envisage us trying to enlist the support of MPs to lobby for that decision.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open this up now. So obviously I've got Councillor
come back to you. I'm interested to know why the supplementary paper we had differed so much from the original paper on this. I mean, it's just incredibly different. I'm interested in why. There's some inconsistencies. On page 7, I mean, I've been doing a comparison between the two documents. On page 7, there's 3 bullet points at the top. This is of the additional paper that came out. It says over 70% supported a park and ride or park and cycle at junction 12. But if we refer to the graphs in the original paper, that's actually not true. It's less than 60%. So there are some errors in this. I'd just like to go to the point that I wanted to make earlier about the Foxton interchange. Firstly, I think it's important not to refer to it as the Foxton Level Crossing Project, because actually it's far more than that. It is the sort of transport hubs that we've been talking about. And I'd like to remind Assembly members that this is the Greater Cambridge City deal, and part of the greater bit is South Cambridgeshire. So it's not all about linking people in the new developments around the city itself. There are people living out in South Cambridgeshire who have to drive in because there is no public transport at all, and for whom the opportunity to park at the Foxton interchange would give them the choice of going on the bus, taking the train, and saying that Foxton is too far away actually is academic, because trains obviously travel quite fast, so it doesn't actually matter that it's that bit further out than other park and rides, but also the opportunity to cycle as well. So I don't feel the arguments that are being put against it are valid. Also, the interchange project, as it is at the moment, has just under 100 parking places in it, but it's adjacent to a great wodge of county council land. So there is significant potential to take more land in order to increase the number of parking bays there, certainly to be equal, if not larger in size than some of the existing park and rides, and make this a true transport hub, serving South Cambridgeshire as well as people living on the fringes of the city.
Okay, thank you. Sir Michael Marshall.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of points. First, on the earlier presentation, it'd be nice if the replies to that could also be known to us as well. I mean, I know you're reporting privately to the officers. It'd be nice to know what the officers have said. I think we need to know that at a future meeting.
So, Michael, we already agreed that it would be distributed to the Assembly.
Now Highways England have established they're going to put in this great route from Oxford to Cambridge. I think we do need to look at or coordinate in a very major way on the Girton interchange, because the junction 14 is on the M11, because the ideas put forward for that could solve so many of the other problems, and we could be wasting money and time if we can't get that part of it sorted. And that if they can now agree what they're going to do in periods 2020, 2025, that could have a major influence. And I do think we ought to ask Highways England even to come to this meeting and talk with us. We should certainly ask our MPs and our new mayor of the greater devolved Cambridgeshire to speak with the Minister Secretary of Transport, who seems very keen on developing proper roads and junctions. And as you know, the Secretary of Transport opened the A14 new thing a couple of days ago, and seemed very, very sort of switched on to promoting roads generally. I think thank you very much.
No, that's fine. I think you've made a very valid point. The Girton interchange keeps coming up as a topic. What can we as an Assembly ask officers to do to actually bring some sort of presentation to us regarding the Girton interchange, what could or couldn't happen in the future? Obviously it'd be nice to have details, but I'm sure we're not going to get that, but it would be good to have some options and timeline of what may or may not happen. Is that possible at all? Mr. Minnies?
I'm sure it's possible. What I suggest we do is see if people from Highways England are going to come and discuss their plans at the future meeting. That's probably the easiest thing to run. I can't speak for them, but I can't see why they wouldn't. I meet regularly with the Highways England people quarterly, and I can raise that with them by email and see if we're interested It's also worth saying in terms of growth and interchange, it was considered as part of the A14, and there's a document that actually shows the views taken of that at the inquiry, for want of a better word, into the development consent order for the A14, and the reasons given by Highways England at that point for not doing an always junction at growth and interchange, which may be of interest to people, which we can circulate.
And then you'll need a really good park and ride at that point where they come together, and that could be really into the future. One point that Bridget made earlier on, there are an awful lot of people coming from East Cambs as well as South Cambs.
Yeah.
I do think we should also not forget East Cambs. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Minnies, I think it would be extremely helpful if we could get someone from Highways England in the near future.
We'll take that as an action.
Thank you. Councillor Carpen.
Yeah, I'm very interested to hear in the presentation a reference to the Atkins report on the Junction 13 bridge, and it sounds like a real...
Go a little bit, yeah.
Use of this chamber.
Bend it down.
Yeah, it sounds like a really fundamental shift in the information that we've been presented with on previous occasions, and I'm just wondering why, if the LLF had got access to this information, that we as the Assembly haven't been informed, because it seems to be quite a radical release of information from a reputable company, Atkins. I mean, I'm just thinking, if we had time to have this alternative section printed and distributed to us, I would have thought something like this information would have been important enough to inform us, to be informed about, rather than waiting for an outside LLF speaker to reveal this information to us for the first time.
I think it's a good point. Could I have an officer response to that report published in June, was it?
Yeah, the report itself was published much earlier this year. It was presented by myself to the LLF, I believe in June, with a presentation, and reports have been publicly available from that point. But in terms of the decision making that was put forward in October, it really is, in a transport planning sense, it's not a significant issue, because fundamentally the decision making in October was around strategically whether or not a segregated end-to-end bus rapid transit route was considered to be the best solution for officers to go out and look at in more detail as the next stage of work. Now, in terms of a new additional capacity over junction 13, either way, that doesn't provide any of that segregated end-to-end bus rapid transit provision. So in terms of the strategic discussion, and that was the key thing to really get across, is that in October it was about a strategic discussion about what we think we should then look at in more detail. The junction 13 issue is really a very small element of a much bigger picture, because it's certainly the case that there are certainly parts of the public highway all along the route that you could introduce high quality bus priority measures, and nobody's suggesting that couldn't be done. But the point here is that the discussion and debate was about whether or not a busway type solution, and I'm sure we're all cognizant of that in other parts of the county, whether that was the best thing in terms of generating the wider benefits for City Deal. So I don't believe that the fact that junction 13 was not highlighted as being potential to bolt on some additional infrastructure would in any way change the fundamental calculation. And in any case, as I say, the information has been made publicly available for some months.
Could we have just a link to it sent out to Assembly members? I think that would be a good way forward. And then anyone who wants to delve into it in more detail and find out exactly what was in that report can do so. And if they don't have any questions, they can bring it up with officers or myself. I think that would be a good way forward. Is that okay? Yeah, I'm getting nods, so that's good. Right, Dr. Wells.
Going back to the Western Orbital, there were 3 points that I'd like to make really. The first would be about to pick up on Tanya's comment. The strategic purpose of the Western Orbital is to connect, sensitive populations, sensitive employment. My observation is that actually the Western Orbital stops essentially at junction 11 of the M11, which is 2 miles from the biomedical campus. And I think I would sort of really stress here that we need to be very careful that what we are designing are transport systems, and the concrete comes second. This should not be a concrete conversation. It should be a transport system conversation, and a road that ends, or a method of transport that ends 2 miles away from people's location of employment will not get used and will be a white elephant. So we have to look at the system integration issue rather than as a capital investment. And I know our remit is bounded around the capital investment, but it has to take the bigger picture into account. The second point I make is around the park and rides. And it does seem to me that we're having a conversation about, well, should it be here or should it be there? Is Trumpington running out of capacity? I think one could be relatively strategic and deterministic about it. I think we should be very clear about what is the strategic purpose of a park and ride, and I don't think we are clear. And secondly, I think we could be relatively deterministic in number terms. So, to take our own information, we are saying that 25,000 journeys a day additional will be needed in 2031. And we need to relieve congestion in the centre. Let's take 10% of the existing travel, which is another 13,000. So there are 38,000 journeys a day going into central Cambridge by the numbers that we've published. And by our own logic, that will almost entirely have to be by bus transport when it gets right to the centre. So if there are 8 radial routes for the sake of argument going to Cambridge, you've got 38,000 journeys to get down 8 pipes. You need about 5,000 parking spaces if it's all park and ride on each of the radial routes. That's the logic of our own numbers. Now, it may not be it isn't quite right, I'm sure, but having a concept that a single park and ride seems to me not to grasp the magnitude of the challenge. That we're talking, if we're relying on park and rides to play a large portion of the mode shift at the appropriate radius to get people onto the buses for the central section, then we are talking much larger numbers than we've hitherto seemed to contemplate. And therefore it becomes an imperative to get the right provision in probably a number of locations on each of the on each of the radial routes. So to me, the number, there's just a reality check on scale and strategic intent that we need to look at. And the third and final point I would make is, again, if we look at our strategy is fundamentally based on mode shift, of getting people largely to move to buses. I mean, rail plays a part, but moving to buses. And second element of our strategy is, if you can have segregated bus provision, it's not liable to congestion. You can therefore offer a quick and economic bus mode. That's the fundamental principle on which much of what we're talking about rests. So my question would be, why do I drive past a park and ride to sit in a traffic queue to park on site at Addenbrooke's when all of the infrastructure elements exist today? There's Trumpington Park and Ride and a dedicated busway going to the biomedical campus. But I and hundreds of other people choose not to mode shift. If we can't prove that as a model experiment will work, then the strategic premise of the bigger plan is flawed. And I would have thought it'd be worth doing the experiment to really understand what it takes to get that mode shift. And there are hundreds of people every day not doing it. And there is no infrastructure reason why they would not. So those would be my 3 things.
Okay, when you asked the question of why you specifically drive past parking lots, I'm assuming that you can answer that. Would you? I'll rephrase it for the officers. I think there's two good points there. First of all, the numbers that you quoted, I think, actually were quite frightening, and I'd like officers' responses on that. And secondly, why is it that some people still are not mode shifting? Is it because of reliability or the unreliability of the public transport we have at the moment, or is it something else? Who could answer that, please? Mr. Millis?
Again, I don't have all the figures in front of me, but I think it's a point we have been making throughout the city deal process from the very start, that the scale of the challenge we face. And I think the other point we've also been making is that it's not just about carrots. I presume you have somewhere to park your car? As do I, in Shire Hall. I have to confess, I'm complaining about that. It's very hard to get on the bike on these cold mornings when I know there's a parking space waiting for me. I do try. So that, on the side of the equation of some degree of stick as well as carrot, all the evidence from around the world suggests you do need both. You put the infrastructure in place. Having said that, clear air, use of the daily busway is 3.75 million trips a year, growing at 3%. So some people are using it, many people are using park and ride, which again is fairly static in terms of numbers at the moment against the national picture, as was mentioned earlier, our bus use dropping.
Okay, could I ask you about the numbers that Dr. Wells actually quoted there, which was, I know it was a very high level assessment of park and rides and where we're meant to go in 2030 as far as numbers are concerned. But it did seem quite frightening. I mean, what's the capacity of our park and rides at the moment?
I haven't got the numbers in front of me, so I can't comment on the numbers. I think you were working on the assumption that all the mode share was all taken by park and ride. Yes.
But even if it was only half.
Yeah. We currently have about 5,000 spaces around Cambridge and another 1,300 along the busway. There's room to expand along Stanton site, but on the other sites they built out to their full size. So if we were to double the number of parking spaces, which I think you were suggesting, we would need a lot more. But we see that the solution doesn't just lie in park and ride, it lies in getting people on the bus from their end of their street, be that in St Ives or Camborne or Newmarket or Haverhill even, getting people on the bus without them driving their car at all. It relies on people closer in, cycling in very significant numbers, and that's growing rapidly at the moment. It involves people using trains as well, which has come up in discussion today. It has to be a mixed economy of all of these things to tackle that. I think building it was at 5,000 on each radio you worked out.
Well, if everything
Yeah.
was parking up,
Yeah. There is capacity in the park and ride system at the moment. Trumpington is close to full, Magley is full. A lot of that is actually building workers working on adjacent construction sites, which is a temporary thing, but will be due course to be replaced by actual workers. But which brings us back to the topic of needing more park and ride capacity in the western side of Cambridge.
Well, I think the point being made is it's not just the western side of Cambridge. When we're looking at those high-level numbers, we're looking at 19,000, 20,000, even at 50% increase. And you're saying the capacity at the moment is about 4,000. So we're looking at considerably more than what we've got at the moment if we're trying to achieve that mode shift that we are talking. So I think it's a very valid point that Dr. Wells has come up with at the Assembly here. So we'll keep an eye on that going forward, I think. That would be the best way forward. Councillor Puffley.
I'm picking up on more of what Councillor Smith said, and we seem to be concentrating mainly on getting people in and out of the bio campus. But coming from the southern side, living on the southern side, Salisbury is going to be the main hub of all the science park developments that's going there and future developments. And yet there's little mention of the potential of putting a station at Salisbury that's already basically on Salisbury Spicer side, which is already there. It just means putting a little bit of a big building up, and you've got that community, that link, especially with, after Michael's mentioned, the corridor that's coming up with Oxford and Cambridge, and the new railway system possibly that's connecting London Stansted and Cambridge as well. So we do need to be looking at the south as much as we're looking into the centre. This would also take the pressure off if you was to actually have a station at Salisbury, because you would open up other links as well. Regarding the Trumpeton thing, the Northwest link, the link to the Trumpeton, is to also help them with that. You also need to have a bus route coming out of there, taking you to the southern sites, Science Park sites, which would also relieve the traffic at Junction 10 and the 505. Yet none of this has actually been considered or talked about yet.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. I welcome the contribution of Dr. Wells a moment ago. I think it's good to be reminded of the overriding purpose of what we're doing here, and I'm personally of the opinion that having arrived at a local plan which has people living a long way away from the city in conventional commuting terms, we have an obligation, and that's what we're really for, to have people get from where they will be living to where they will be working. And the concentrations of the living and the working are such that inevitably we're going to need something good that does go around the west side of the city to have people get to work and back again reliably. I was a bit disappointed in the composition of the consultation responses, therefore, because what I read is that the people who responded to this were not really daily travellers of that route. In fact, only less than 15% of them were daily travellers along that route, and that the largest group of people who responded were people who did the route in the daytime anyway. And that, I think, it's not the central purpose of what we're doing. Of course, we will hope to create facilities that people can use at all times of day, but the times of day that I think we're mainly concerned about, because they're most under pressure, are the peak hours. So I'd be interested in the officer's comment on the fact that we didn't seem to succeed in getting from this consultation a sort of real critical mass input from people who have the experience of commuting, have the need to commute to get to work and back. The second point I wanted to make was that on the issue of on or off the M11 and east or west of the M11, appreciate officers' comment on whether I've interpreted what we've been given as information correctly or not. I mean, what I think I see is that from what we know now of Highways England position, it's pretty likely we're going to be looking at an off M11 solution, because the congestion along the motorway today is already a problem for those who pass that way, and the policies and restrictions that the Highways England seem to be applying, and their current view of the future seems to imply that if we want something, we're going to have to provide extra, and extra is going to have to be offline. Now, I appreciate the discussion that the Highways England view could change, but I'd appreciate some sort of validation or otherwise of my take on the fact that if everything stayed as it was now in terms of Highways England, we'd probably be looking at an offline solution. And then going back to the consultation, so I think slightly more people wanted to see an on-road solution, and obviously I think I would join everyone in saying that would be a great solution, but the real acid test of that is, in transport terms, is that going to achieve our objectives? And so I'd be interested to understand from officers again, on what basis were people being asked to say whether they liked an on-road or an off-road or an east or west solution here, because reading the consultation output, it seems like there's not a lot of context to the question, and therefore, and if there was more than I think, let's know about it, but it seems that it's difficult to interpret the responses we got from that, because it's not really very qualitative, it's very numerical, and it's not clear on what basis were people just saying they wanted furthest away from where they live, or were they saying that they wanted it to be the most efficient from a transport perspective. Really, we've always said these exercises aren't really local referenda, so they're only of use in the sense that they actually throw into the system the actual criteria or factors that people have a concern about. The third point I wanted to make was about the park and ride question. We're sort of facing the same type of question that we faced in the A428 scheme about what is a good place conceptually to put a park and ride site in relation to origin and destination. And I feel we don't know enough about that. It's not about particularly this scheme or particularly another scheme, and there will presumably be other schemes that we consider down the line. But what is the science of this matter? What happens if you put a park and ride sites a long way away from the destination? And the issue that often worries me about this point about putting them a long way away, is what it does to traditional bus services, because it seems to me that what it could do is cannibalise the demand for normal scheduled bus services in a way which they fold even more than they have folded already, because people get their car out in villages to go to a park and ride site rather than want to take a bus that goes maybe up their main street. And it would be a great pity then if we kind of, in the villages, were turning public transport into something that was really only accessible to people who had a car to get to a park and ride site. And I think that is a concern. It would be really good if at some point we could have a focused discussion on what we need to know about what works and what are the consequences of different choices in terms of the location of park and ride sites. And the final point I wanted to ask was about the recommendations and about the options that are in the report. And these are on page 31, I think. We've got the recommendations which are at the front of the report, and then we've got two other approaches which aren't being recommended. And I wondered that the third of those, which asks officers to come forward with a recommendation next, seems to have some advantages. It talks about being able to integrate better with other schemes. It talks about saving resources, and so I started to sort of say, well, why isn't that being recommended? And I wonder why officers haven't recommended that option, and what we would lose if we didn't go for that option, which is paragraph 38 in the report, and why they recommended as they have for a different thing to bring back to us. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So basically, I think we've got two questions on the consultation, which is the mix and type of people that were asked, and the actual questions that were asked, i.e. on-road, off-road, etc. The positioning of the park and ride, especially how far it could be and the implications. And also, we actually have some new recommendations in the new supplement that was handed out. It's got a third recommendation on it regarding highways England, just so that everyone's aware, which is why I was pressing that point as well. But you've got a valid question about the original agenda pattern, paragraph 38. So I'm going to hand over to officers for that.
So going through your points, in terms of the consultation, I mean, we would certainly be the first to admit that in terms of numbers and the type of correspondence, we have limited control of that. We set out a very extensive set of documentation across a very wide area, and obviously because the Western Orbital, it's a future-orientated scheme, and so one of the reasons perhaps why the number of people that responded currently didn't use that particular route perhaps as high as some of the other schemes, because at the moment the demand is still growing, and that's one of the reasons why, going back to the sort of later question, that this is a tranche 2 scheme, tranche 2 to 3 potentially, so it's a slightly longer term scheme because of the fact that the demand is still there and more future orientated than, for example, the A428 scheme, where we know that the demand is already there because it's a radial corridor. And the nature of information provided was, at this stage, quite high level. So, in terms of principles, we were setting out the possible future impacts of growth on the corridor, and in that context, how people saw the future of transport provision along the corridor, whether they felt that in principle a dedicated bus segregated route would actually better serve the corridor, or whether they felt perhaps that the advantages of staying on existing infrastructure were more important. And it was nothing more than that, and necessarily so really, I mean, in terms of the level of information that we had, because the nature of the process is that we gather more information about the details as we move forward. In terms of park and ride, I mean, we have been asked to do a study of park and ride as part of the A428 scheme in terms of compare and contrast, and I don't have the terms of reference of that in front of me, but fundamentally the key parts of an assessment are going to be around accessibility in terms of how easy it is for users of the park and ride and bus services to get in and out of it, reliability, operational ease, frequency, because obviously clearly the closer we are into the destination and the higher frequency services, and that potentially is more and more attractive to users, and that then feeds into cost. As I mentioned in my earlier response, clearly if we're running buses over a longer distance, then there's higher costs as well. There's also opportunistic issues. I mean, one of the points about Western Orbital is, as we know, that the council does have a land option on one area, which is exactly right, and that was obviously taken out because of the intersection benefits of that land option. And there's also points about environmental impacts as well. So it's not so much as a quantitative assessment in all regards, it's also qualitative in terms of a broader understanding. There are various studies around where the optimal place of parking rides are. And clearly, one of the points being is that you need to look at where the congestion is happening and the psychological side of things as well, because obviously transport planning is not just about science, it's about people's choices, as you, as the gentleman also mentioned there, and we have to get people at the right point in their journey where there will be maximum incentive for them to move out of their car into the bus. In terms of your final point around options, I mean, we have set out in the paper why we're recommending, given these number of sort of strategic issues around the Western Orbital, which are still to be resolved in terms of Highways England and the like, we're not suggesting that we should reach a recommended option initially. And fundamentally, of course, the scheme isn't funded at this point, so there is time to reach a recommended option. And I think that the view would be that perhaps, given there's a lot of information that's been that would help us, I think, reach that point. And going back to the earlier point about the income, I do think it's quite an important point. There is a relationship between the strategic transport network, Highways England, and the local network, which is pulled out more. Just adding more capacity onto the strategic network may not necessarily get the results that you think it will, because obviously those vehicles, they don't just drive around the motorways aimlessly, they're looking to get off the motorways. And if they're all coming onto local roads, there's going to be an impact on local roads. So we need to be conscious of the fact that whatever Highways England do, there is also a view that we might want to take in terms of the local authorities about the impacts on our own networks. So for example, in the case of Junction 11, yeah, okay, if you suddenly widen the motorway, you still have a problem with the junction, and even if you extended the junction to allow more traffic off, well, if it all piled into CBC at peak times, you'd have a problem, all those people who park in CBC, you'd have a problem getting out in the evening. So we need to understand here that more capacity on the strategic network doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get all of the solutions in terms of better transport operation around Cambridge.
Okay, thank you. I've got Claire Ruskin, then Helen Valentine, and then I've got second vice the Cherry for Richard Smith and Sir Michael Marshall, then I'm calling it close to this. Claire Ruskin. Antony.
I think many of us could make long speeches on many aspects of this. Just picking on a couple. One, I would like to ask whether there is any evidence base for the traffic. So consultation is good. It tends to be quite subjective. So if we do have an evidence base for the numbers of vehicles travelling on these routes at the moment and the projections for the future. So Ian Lewis, I know, has been collecting a lot of data. If we could see that or links to it, that would be very helpful. I think it's tempting to answer John's question, which is why he doesn't get out of his car and get on the bus. I think it's because it's probably the last part of a longer journey, and people don't tend to make a modal shift at that last point where the end is in sight. Also, possibly you come home later than the park and ride encourages. Long working days, possibly.
Are we talking very long hours?
I agree, and hundreds of other people making that.
Exactly. And we see it as well. We have people travelling a long way and they come past the Antony Park and Ride, but it's the last 10 minutes of an hour's journey. So you're unlikely to make the shift at that point. If you can move the park and rides further out, then you do a number of things, and you don't need to cannibalise the village services if you can do a small shuttle bus collecting people from the villages in a longer route, taking them to a hub, for example, at Camborne, and then an express route in from those further out park and ride facilities. I'll stop there. There are all sorts of points we could all make, I'm sure.
I think one of the questions you asked though was, do we have the statistics for the volume of vehicles? So I'll ask officers, obviously I'm sure they have, but just to confirm.
Yeah, we do have statistics, and we have statistics on a number of factors. We have existing data using things like Traffic Master, which is various sensors that are used, and the data is made available to the county council. And we also have projections, which at this stage we use of the strategic modelling, which obviously looks at the interrelationship between the changes in land use and demand over time, and delves quite deeply into sort of demographic issues as well. So there is a degree of science around modelling, but obviously it is modelling. So it's an approximation of the future reality. We can be 100% sure what's going to happen in 20-30 years in terms of volume.
To cut you short, so there is evidence, that's good. My observation is that I queue dangerously on that road, and if we don't do something before the timescale in here, then those dangerous queues will be getting much, much worse. We're talking about 2019 in these papers.
Noted, thank you. Helen Valentine.
Yeah, I guess it's echoing some of the concerns that have already been expressed, and looking at the leaflet about the Western Orbital, which I accept may not be all of the documentation that form the consultation, it doesn't, in my opinion, give the sense of the scale of the challenge that we're being confronted with in the way that John was talking about, and therefore it's potentially not very surprising that people came back saying, well, I'd like an incremental minor change rather than a new lane. And I just wonder whether in all of our consultations we need to get some of this key data about really serious changes to the amount of traffic that we're potentially dealing with, and therefore needing, in a sense, really serious non-incremental responses. Now, it doesn't guarantee, of course, that everybody would agree, but I think they'd understand the kind of scale of the challenge that we're facing, perhaps a little bit better than this particular document highlights.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just another point on park and rides on page 5. The officer response on park and ride provision talks about park and ride sites which are too far out. I'd be very interested to know, what we're basing our judgment over what is too far out on, please. I find it difficult to accept that park and rides that are far further out from the city will be more costly to operate than ones that are close in. I don't understand that. I do understand that the bus journeys will cost more because they're having to travel further. But I don't understand why, for the county council, they should be more costly to operate. And if a park and ride further out is successful in driving modal shift, does that not negate the need for expensive bus priority to support them? Because actually the cars will be off the roads and therefore the buses will be able to happily whiz in. Or if the roads are clear, does that just mean that people won't get out of their cars and the buses will continue to compete with them?
Okay, thank you. So, would you like, who can give that response, starting with how far out is too far out?
I don't think there's an absolute rule of that. We have a park ride at St Ives that is relatively successful, about 500 vehicles a day parked in it. But then that has got very, very good bus priority into Cambridge. It is about, it's that trade-off. If you can get that really high quality bus priority all that way in, then you can do it. Obviously, we built the busway primarily to serve Ulster. That's when we built out now. Going to St Ives was an added bonus as part of that. But that has cost a lot of money to build that busway. The point of operation cost is it is about the cost of operating the bus service. When the park and ride was moved from Cowley Road to Milton Road, that required an extra bus in that service. About £100,000 a year extra operating costs on the operator with no extra income. So that it is, if you just talk about pure park and ride, not like we've got with the busway, where the buses also want to serve other places, it is primarily around the length of bus journey, which does then get reflected in ticket prices.
I'm not sure that question was actually answered then. I'm assuming that what you're saying is each park and ride is taking on its own merits as far as usage, economics, etc.
You have to look at it as part of a system. So, very, very crudely, about 10% of busway users park and ride. The rest are on the bus in St Ives or somewhere en route along the busway. So, you have a park and ride St Ives almost as a bonus of that service because you've got the busway there. That's 12 miles from Cambridge, 12 miles from the science park because you've got it as part of that system. If you're building a park ride in isolation with a dedicated bus service, that's a different thing. And the closer you can get it to the edge of the city, the better because you keep costs down because there's a dedicated bus service.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. So Michael, you open this questions anyway.
John Will's very good summary of the need for spoke straight in by Carpen ride or whatever. It does underline the importance of a really good ring road system to take pressure off the centre. Otherwise, people coming in from the east have to go through the centre very often to get in from the west to get their park and ride. They don't want to have to change buses in the middle. It causes more congestion in the middle. I do think we need to put much more emphasis on ring roads, on right round Cambridge, and even an orbital connection between the motorways as well, the A11, the M11 and the A14, so that the traffic can actually get round without going near the centre. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to draw this to a close now. In the supplement that was put out to everyone after the main agenda pack, on page 2, you've got recommendations, 2 exactly, well, almost exactly the same as in the original agenda pack, and you've got a third one regarding Highways England, which is, as I say, why I was questioning that at the beginning as well. I think on the basis that this is a work in progress and probably tranche 2 rather than anything else, I can't see any reason not to agree with those 3 recommendations, but obviously I'll take the concerns raised to the board, the major concerns raised to the board as well, as I always do. So can I just have a quick show of hands, all those that actually support the recommendations as per your supplement, page 2, please?